Good evening, everybody. Yay. We have been sort of flirting with this idea of exploring the top of Inwood Hill and finding out the mansions that were there before. A lot of us know the story that before the city was here, this was a neighborhood of country homes. Supposedly, they were all demolished, but when you look up there, you find things that are kind of look like foundations and things. So the question of today's talk is, what can we find if we were to go up onto Inwood Hill and educate ourselves ahead of time and try and figure out where houses are, and then go to those sites and see what's still there. So the Gilded Age homes, these are homes from the 1800s, the homes of very wealthy people on top of Inwood Hill. So the three parts of the talk. The third part is the main body of it, but we're going to lead up to the building boom, get a little bit of background, and then we'll find out a little bit about each of the estates, because we've actually figured out exactly how many homes were up there and where they were and what they looked like. And we have photos of most of them. And then we're going to go up on the hill. Rather, I went up on the hill in the last 6 weeks with a video camera, mostly getting good stuff. So excited to share it with you tonight. So we're going to see six sites: Thomson, Brooks, Keppler, Straus, the House of Mercy, and then everything else. That's how we're going to break it down. There were multiple owners of each of those sites. But our story starts with the road that goes to the top of Inwood Hill. And here's a Revolutionary War map made by the British in 1782 that shows a road going up to the fort at the top of Inwood Hill called Cock Hill Fort. It had a few cannons up there. It was at first made by the Americans, but the British quickly took it over and then used it for the duration of the war. A lot of soldiers, British soldiers and mercenaries, lived up here during the war, and this would have been the road that they used to get to their fort at the top of Inwood Hill, pretty much at the apex of the hill, with a view of the Hudson and the Harlem, and north too, to the Bronx. So pay attention to the route of that road, because after the war, some developers, the first attempt at development, and it was an abortive attempt, John and Curtis Bolton, in 1816, bought land from the heirs of the Nagels, who were the Post family. And I don't know if that blue area is what they bought, but they did buy land from the Posts so that they could develop the area for residences. They built the road, which still has their name. It's their only legacy. But by 1829, they were on to other things. In the neighborhood, they had a marble mill to cut marble using the tides. Then they moved up north from here and didn't really get anything going besides a road, which still has their name. And then quick moving on, in around 1835, the first commuter, Samuel Thomson, we've talked about him before, he bought some land from the Dykmans and built a dock. First thing he did in 1835. Then he built himself a lavish home, the first mansion atop Inwood Hill. He called it Mount Washington. This is the second home that he built because he had to build it twice. Right as he was finishing it the first time, it caught fire and burned to the ground, and then he immediately rebuilt it. So this is 1842, the top of Inwood Hill. This is where the overlook site is now. So there's still a fence here. This is all cut away. It's a cliff. But you can see he's got an overlook there. So it's been an overlook since the 1840s at least, and probably before. He was the only person to be crazy enough to build a mansion in the middle of nowhere. But in 1849, the Hudson River Railroad opened for business from Chambers Street to destinations north, eventually to Albany. In 1849, it started stopping at Tubby Hook. Here's an 1858 schedule of the New York City Manhattan stops up to Yonkers, and this is the station that was at Tubby Hook. Originally called Tubby Hook until the 1860s, when it was changed kind of arbitrarily to Inwood. And with that stroke, a town sprang up along Dyckman Street, and because the train was there and because there was already a mansion there, Other rich people wanted to build mansions on top of Inwood Hill, and a support community grew up on Dykeman Street to support those mansions, including William Ladd Flitner, who first discovered Inwood when he delivered barges filled with lumber for the new mansions being built. And he loved the area so much that in around 1860 he moved there with his family and built this rather nice home close to Payson Avenue. Between 1849 and 1860, that's just 11 years, 14 homes were built at the top. And this is a great map. I just recently found this at the New York Public Library. It's the earliest map of Inwood Hill with the houses on it that I've seen. All the other maps just show one house, and then suddenly 14 homes. So let's take a close look at this. We can see Albert Beek. There's a street named after him in the neighborhood. An umbrella merchant, Cole reminds me. A lot of these names we can learn about, but there are more famous people who lived in these homes later. That's L.H. Mann, Elisha Brooks, one of the Brooks brothers, Hayes, Thomson, Francis Thomson. This is where Isidor Straus ended up living, the Macy's proprietor. So from 1850 to 1870, Tubby Hook was a hot new neighborhood for the well-heeled. And here we can see some of the real estate ads. Here from 1855, a 13-room cottage for a gentleman. And after Samuel Thomson died in 1850, the next person was set here 8 years later is trying to sell the place. Samuel Thomson's home is advertised as 14 rooms with 260 feet of waterfront, a storeroom, water closet, pantries, bathroom, billiard room, a natural gas supplied by a gas house. The ad even says you can make your own gas there. A fine supply of spring water and a stable with room for 4 horses, a cow, and a gardener. And here's an ad in 1859 for home site available with celebrity neighbors, including one of the Brooks brothers. They list the neighbors by name, just in case that is the thing that makes you want to buy. Joseph Thomson built 2 homes, one next to each other, so that he could sell the second one. And there's his spec home, brand new construction, splendid view of the Hudson River, built of brick in the most substantial manner, 18 or 20 rooms with all the modern improvements, gas from the Harlem Company, so these homes would have had lighting inside, and a stable, a carriage house, and 2.5 or 4 acres, depending on how much you wanted to buy. And then later, the Straus home, originally owned by Francis Thomson, described in this ad as 5 acres, garden, lawn, ornamental and fruit trees, carriage drive covered with Kingston gravel. That must have been deluxe. A wide porte cochere, that's a covered entryway, carved piazzas, I think that's a fancy word for porch, gas, hot and cold water, bathroom, furnace, carriage house, gardener's house, stables, a fully stocked ice house, and a 40-mile view of the Hudson River and Harlem Valley. So these homes were high-end homes at the top of a hill with spectacular views, manicured lawns. Here we can even see an auction for the top of Inwood Hill, auction on 1866, Tubby Hook. And here are a few of the classy homes built in that 11-year period. I have one photo of people from that time, a black tie party on the lower level of the road. This is called the River Road. It goes along the Hudson River. We can see people in top hats and tuxedos in a gazebo. That's the store at Tubby Hook with a horse. The Hudson River looking down towards Jeffrey's Hook, and a very fancy little happy hour happening. But in 1871, it was the end of the jet-setting time in Inwood Hill because Grand Central Station opened on the east side, and it reduced Inwood's popularity as a weekend destination because most train service was rerouted to the Bronx side of the Harlem River, and fewer trains stopped at Inwood. James McCreary, who was an owner of a department store and had one of the largest and best homes in the neighborhood, still wanted to live here, He petitioned to get permission to privately build a bridge at 207th Street so that he could get to the train station at University Heights. Maybe this is why there's a bridge at 207th Street today. Not all the wealthy people left, but after many of them left, the top of the hill sort of became kind of a dumping ground for society's outcasts. The House of Mercy took the place of the Thomson House, alcohol and addiction treatment for destitute and fallen women. The Magdalene Benevolent Society, treatment for, these are their words, chastity offenders, erring females, and unwed mothers. And then the House of Rest for consumptives for advanced tuberculosis patients. So all the not in my backyard people from downtown, they had influence, and so these institutions ended up in this neighborhood. So the mansions fell into disuse and nature sort of started to reclaim Inwood Hill. Those that remained here were renting from the city month to month, because starting in 1916, the city started acquiring the land on top of Inwood Hill as a park, including the houses. So nailed to this New York Times article says, nailed to the trees are signs, private no trespassing, but this is in truth a city park, and the houses are rented by the city itself without leases until such time as the city sets about the improvement. And during this time of neglect, a lot of houses burned down. In 1840, we know about that. That was not out of neglect. But in 1911, the Mitchell Levy home burned. During a dinner party, the house burned to a ground. The old Hayes mansion at the very top of the hill burned down. It was so bright that crowds lined the New Jersey shore to watch it. Here's a barn. We saw some pictures of that barn burning in the pre-slides before the show started. The Beacon Talcott home, Talcott the cotton merchant, his house burned. It was already abandoned, burned in 1924. And then the McCreary house in 1926, and finally the Flitner home in 1930. And possibly more. This is just what I could find articles about. And in 1926, Inwood Hill becomes officially dedicated. Here you can see how the city went about acquiring the land, and this green area was acquired first. And that's where a lot of these mansions that we're going to talk about tonight were. All right, so there's our background information. The last thing that happens is Robert Moses creates the Henry Hudson Parkway in 1937 and tears everything down. You can see sort of what it might have looked like. This is in Fort Tryon with bulldozers, Mike Mulligan steam shovels, and big dump trucks moving debris, bulldozing debris into holes, taking away big chunks to landfills. And that happened all through the park. All the houses were torn down, and all the institutions were torn down also. And then they just let nature take its course. Portions of the old roads that we've talked about, the Bolton Road, the Revolutionary Road, are now part of our park trail. We can see these portions of the old roads that are trails, part of our park pathways today. Here's Bolton Road coming up from Payson Avenue. More than half of it is the old Bolton Road. How it connected to the other side has been changed. Now the park paths are in different places, and then there's a little bit of this river road too. So let's talk about these roads. And here's Bolton Road and the 9 and 10 homes that were along it. 10 homes on this one road, and the 10th to be built here later for the one that ended up being a tuberculosis asylum. This was called Bolton Road. Later, another road called River Road was built. Sometimes they call this Lower Bolton Road. 5 homes here, including McCreary, who wanted to build the 207th Street Bridge. So 15 homes altogether. Very rare pictures of all these homes, except for the question marks. Still looking for number 5. This is like a baseball card collection. You got to catch them all. There are a few that I haven't found yet. One site had 2 houses on it. This was destroyed. Mostly the homes that were destroyed in fires early on, I don't have photos of. 1911, destroyed in fire. 1912, still need that. So William Ladd Flitner was the ship captain who first discovered the neighborhood when he was delivering lumber for the houses being built. And we can see here on the 1913 map, it's 32 feet tall. The maps tell you everything. 32 feet tall, brick basement, 2 stories with a basement and an attic, B and A, and a library. And because it's yellow, that means it's made of wood, so it's a frame house. And because it has an X on it, it has a shingle roof instead of a slate roof. So we can tell a lot about the construction of the house from these old fire insurance maps. What remains of this? Unknown. Probably nothing. It's actually right in the middle of this more modern path going up from Payson Avenue. Albert Beek and Frederick Talcott lived in this next house that was destroyed by fire in 1924. Here's a photo of it. 35 feet tall, 2-story brick house with an attic, basement, a cupola, wraparound porch. You can see the wraparound frame porch around a red brick structure, and a tile or slate roof. This athletic club was a later addition in the 1900s. There are some tiny remains of it that we will see. The twin houses, they were built later than most of the other houses, built around 1879 for 2 sisters who had gotten married and they wanted to live next to each other. So they moved here with their husbands, Mr. Green and Mr. McDonnell. Later it was sold to become a tuberculosis asylum. And what remains is the retaining wall that holds up the driveway, a laundry annex fragment, and a faint foundation of this addition here. Fred Jones, big unknown, no pictures of this house, but it was a frame house, 4th-story tower room, double porches. Everybody wanted the views. People loved their porches. It burned in 1912. We have a nice photo of this. I think that might be a cow in the front yard there. Demolished probably in the 1930s for a park. 2-story brick frame house, brick basement. The funny thing is, all of these houses had basements. And when you go around up in the hill and you think, how can they have basements? Isn't it all bedrock up there? But apparently at the top of the hill, there's enough soil to build basements. There's a gigantic well that I believe was shared with the next door neighbor. The next door neighbor, Joseph Keppler, an editor of Puck magazine. Everybody had a chicken coop, and here it shows up on the 1913 Keppler. There are a lot of remains of this Keppler estate. It has a large communal well. It probably has a coal cellar, or certainly basements that can be seen in the side of the hill. Pretty extensive. A faint foundation line, a gigantic retaining wall holding up a garden, 20 foot tall. One of the big mysteries I've had over the years, finally figured it out, and a terraced hidden rear garden in an area of the park that I really didn't even know existed because no trails go there. Elisha Brooks, one of the Brooks brothers, famed clothiers, he never sold his place. He lived there till he died, and his estate, as far as I know, kept it going. It was a 2-story brick house with a 4-story observation tower, a basement, front porch, and a tile or slate roof. It has extensive remains, a freshwater well, a cistern, a boiler, and a reflecting pool, believe it or not. There's no water in the pool. And Samuel Thomson. Not much left of his because his house was replaced by the House of Mercy, but there are remains of his barn and there are remains of his guardhouse. And what remains are the below ground areas, the water tanks, cisterns, which we'll talk about in a second, and the driveway to his estate is part of the park path here inside the blue line. You can see that driveway to his estate is a path in the park today. This is his house. Looks like the Parthenon or something. And we read about the features of billiard rooms and all that stuff in his house. But a 2-story frame house with an attic, basement, front colonnade, rear porch, and slate or metal roof. Francis Thomson and Isidor Straus. Isidor Straus and his wife died on the Titanic. And he was the owner or co-owner of Macy's. His home site is a debris field. There's a lot there. So we'll see lots of movies from that. Freshwater well, hitching post probably for horses, garden fence, covered entryway, barn foundations, outbuilding remnants, and even vestiges of the pine trees. A lot of pine trees still there, and there were pine trees in this picture. So the descendants of those pine trees are still growing on the site. This site is a mystery because two houses were there. These are clearly different houses. And one, the first house, disappears after 1895, and the second one appears after 1900. With two owners, just a few things that are left, but not much. Now we'll go down to River Road and take care of those 5 houses, and then we'll head into the field. So the Ursulian Terrace, his wife was named Ursula. He named his house after her. A 30-foot tall house with a brick basement, wraparound porches. We don't know what has happened to many of these houses because the highway is right there. So probably the highway has destroyed everything on these. But we're going to, maybe next year I'll figure out if it's even possible to get close to those areas. Lowry, Palmer, and Grant, briefly lived in by the youngest son of President Ulysses Grant. This 40-foot tall, 3-story frame house with a basement, front porches, back porch tile or slate roof, and what he called the smuggler's walkway, this stairway that went back and forth from the top of the hill down to the river. Mitchell A. Levy, his house burned in the middle of a cocktail hour. He was having a party, someone smelled smoke, and the place burned to the ground in just a couple of hours, 1911. The house next door has some remains left to it. The Joseph Thomson house, most recently, or finally lived in by Cornelius Kalin on River Road. The Inwood Park path that's near it is actually that part of that segment of River Road that exists. And finally, James McCreary, who owned a department store like Macy's, lived on the end of the road. Maybe he built this road just so that he could have this view, the most amazing view, just below the toll booths where the pathway comes up to cross the Henry Hudson Bridge. Nothing remains of that house. It was probably all destroyed when the highway was created. So this is how we find stuff. We've seen this old map from 1866. These are the trails that are there today. So if we look at the trails that are there today, we can sort of see what's near trails that might still exist. This house was destroyed making a trail. This is Joseph Keppler's, the Puck Estate, and you can see his barns going down the hill and his house right next to it. Here's McCreary's in the middle of a trail, destroyed. This house burned. These houses are kind of in the middle of the highway. So we can sort of start by elimination to find out where should we go to find stuff. This is what I took into the hill. So first I studied old maps to find the places of interest. Then I tried to go there before poison ivy started to grow. Used this little tiny cute little rake to clear away the leaves and branches. Took photographs and measurements, and then I restored everything. And in order to help me catch stuff, because I'm trying to go down wells and into underground, a lot of underground stuff still exists, this selfie stick expands to 10 feet long. And sometimes I could attach this gimbal stabilizer to it so that it wasn't vibrating all over the place, and LED light in case I was looking into some dark cavern to hell. And leather gloves are super important. All right, so this is what we're looking for. We're looking for wells. Wells pump groundwater to the surface. We're looking for cisterns. Cisterns are tanks that store rainwater underground. A cistern, that water is going to be used for doing laundry, watering your garden, taking care of animals, maybe bathing. A well water is spring water, really, from underground for drinking and cooking. We're going to be looking for foundations, sometimes faint. We're going to be looking for architectural leftovers. And this is about the best we can hope for because everything was bulldozed. And everything was put into dump trucks, and this is what they left behind. In 2013, Cole climbed into a well just so that I could take this picture. All right, first site is Samuel Thomson. He died in 1850, and people lived in his house until around 1890 when the House of Mercy was built. This is Abraham Van Nest, who was the successor. And here we could see the house in 1847 all by itself on top of Inwood Hill. We could see the tubby hook. This is where all the raw materials are going to be. And here's Spuyten Duyvil up here. And here's Fort Tryon down here. So this is Inwood in 1847 with one house. And here's that house in an 1847 engraving. We can see Fort Tryon in the distance with a mansion on top of that hill. So you can see that the wealthy they liked this idea. Steamboats were in action, so you could travel by boat if you needed to. And let's see what remains. That's the house. And here are the two sites we're going to visit, a guardhouse and a barn. The guardhouse lasted until the 20th century. It looks just like his house, but it's a miniature version. The Thomson Estate gatehouse was right here on Bolton Road, and it shows up on all the maps right at the gate of his estate. What's left is what was attached to the gutter. You can see the gutter here. You can actually see the gutter pipe going down. It's going to catch rainwater, funnel it into the ground, and they're going to use that water for whatever purposes they need. Because remember, there's no running water at the time. Running water was still in the future. So we've got two cisterns. One is for his barn, or stable probably, for livestock, and one is for probably gardens. So let's explore. There's our first site, the stable. Where is it on the park today? There it is. You can see the path. Many of these things are not far from the path. But I've cleared, this is covered up, I've cleared it away. When we first saw this is from 2013, cisterns are very large. They have a small opening, but they're huge containers, waterproofed with plaster or cement. So you can see that the actual diameter of the container itself is much larger than the opening. They're all lined with brick and concrete. See how big that is? This is one way that these houses got water that could be used for general purposes, just not drinking. And the next cistern at the guardhouse, these new cell phones, you don't need low light cameras or anything. They can really take pictures of anything almost. And so here we can go just to the other side of the property. Here it is, just in the middle of the hillside. I wanted to show you how quickly you can access these things. So there's the Thomson estate. Now we'll go to Elisha Brooks, and he had this property that went down to the river, came right up to Bolton Road here. So there are actually no park trails in his property. So this is almost the most extensive bushwhacking. It's off trail for sure. Everything. What are we going to see? His giant cistern that probably fed the reflecting pool, a freshwater well, and a furnace or a boiler. And it's a super antique iron gigantic boiler. So the freshwater well, this thing 40 inches in diameter, 34-inch well, and then a 55-inch cistern. This was the inspiration for, and I'm pretty sure that this is true, the inspiration for a whodunit novel of a murder mystery called The Dragon Murder Mystery. We'll talk about that in a sec. So exploring the Brooks site, you'll see that what we're doing is we have to leave the trail and head towards the highway. That's looking north. We're going to turn west and go where very few people have gone before. But you can see the Hudson River in the distance. All right. It's pegged into the ground. Who knows how far it goes? It's got these things that look like steam tubes have come off of them. And not far away is our first well of the evening. This would have been how the Elisha Brooks family would have gotten their fresh water, their drinking water, straight out of the ground, either with a pump or with a bucket on a rope. There's the pipe that the pump would have been attached to. This is what the selfie sticks are good for. And really just a few feet away, and I don't know how they filled this with water, a gigantic underground water tank. 50-some inches in diameter. Who knows how big it is underground, but we'll take a look. All these things are covered with branches, and just to take these movies, I uncovered them and then restored them. Back to the trail. So I think that the reflecting pool at the Brooks estate was the inspiration for S.S. Van Dyne's Dragon Pool Murder Mystery. The Dragon Pool Murder Mystery is set in Inwood Hill Park along Bolton Road. The Dragon Murder Case, a Philo Vance story. There's actually a movie even made. The Stam Estate Inwood, fictitious. And here's the inside of the book. It has a dragon pool, a mansion, and Bolton Road. So here's Bolton Road and a mansion and a pool. I think there might be a connection here. Hopefully there's no real dragons. So if you go there, basically what happens is the ground just goes away from your feet in a gigantic bowl shape that you can walk into. You can see the sides of this. It is totally dry and rubble filled, but once you're in it, except for where the spillway is, you can't see. You're in a hole, a giant hole the size of a pond. And here's the spillway, or weir, I guess they call it, W-E-I-R, that's at the lowest elevation on it, where water would have spilled. Now here we can actually see, looking towards it, you can see the pond right there. Next site is Joseph Keppler, editor of Puck. A lot of good stuff here. The biggest well on top of Inwood Hill that Betty Lee showed Cole and I once in 2013. Faint foundation line of maybe the house, but certainly the barns. The biggest structure in Inwood Park that comes from those days, a 20-foot tall fieldstone corner wall that propped up some gardens. And I've often wondered what this was. You see it from the Clove Path. And here we can actually see it on this 1860 map, this 3-level garden. You can see the 3 levels even today with this corner. And this props up, this created level A. This corner made of fieldstone, maybe from that rock quarry at the top of the hill, created this wall. We'll show you a garden area later that it was unknown to me until recently. So the Keppler well, here's Cole in 2013 looking down in it. This is what it's like today. Here are the basements that you can still see just off trail. We actually found a piece of coal there once. Maybe this is a place where they stored coal, or it just fell off and it was being stored nearby. But we can actually see 3 levels, 1, 2, and 3. We'll take a closer look at that later. 1, 2, 3. There are 3 plateaus between the Clove and the Ridge Trail. They're flat. No trail goes there. They're almost impossible to get to. But somebody has a big tent there and lives there. So let's take a look at this property. All right, so we're starting in the Clove area. So Shirakapak is at the end of that trail. We're looking up the hill. This is not far from the bird sanctuary, and it's so hard to see. But there's this thing that looms, and you can see it. It's made of rock. You think, well, is that from the 1930s? What is the story there? Here's how I got to it. It's extremely difficult to get to. You don't even realize how big it is until you're standing next to it. There is my height, up 10 feet, up. I measured it, it's 20 feet at the corner. That's me from the top of it, trying to not fall off. Three plateaus. The old maps show I don't know, formal gardens or maybe vegetable gardens here. So you can see the steep and then level and then steep. Next slope and then the level. Somebody lives there. And now we can see it from a distance and sort of get a better look in our minds of it. The access route would have been behind number 3 there. You can see 1, 2, 3, and there's more here, and it got shallower and shallower until you could actually get to it from the trail. On the edge of the cliff is the coal cellar. Aha, there you are. I think that's amazing that it's right there in plain sight. If you look close, you can see the brick flooring. covered by grass. I wonder if that's like that in other places in the park. Oh. Check out the well. You can't do this now. There's a huge tree trunk in there that's, I mean, you couldn't lift it if you tried. This well is so big, it makes me think that it might have been served a communal function. Maybe a couple of the houses used it, because it's more well than any one home needs. Here I am speaking like I know what I'm talking about, but well. There it is today. We can still take the selfie stick down in it, though. All fieldstone. This must have been hard to build. It's filled with leaves at the bottom. Who knows how far the water actually is down below there, but it's filled up so that it's dry now. There's only one well that's still wet at the bottom on the hill, and that's the Straus well. All handmade, probably between 1850 and 1860. And suddenly, you could be walking by it. This is 150 feet off the path. Last big area to tackle, Isidor Straus. Straus estate. They died on the Titanic, but they put their servants on the lifeboats, so the servants survived. Here's what's left. Stones from the porte cochere, covered entryway architectural stones. They're giant. They weigh hundreds of pounds. I mean, there are bigger stones, but then a well, a barn site, hitching post, fence, foundation, and the east overlook buildings are part of this site. That's number 5. There's a current overlook there now that's a mix of old and new. So here's the front of the home in 1860, overlooking the Hudson River. Spectacular views. Apparently you could see from this tower, you could see the Harlem River and the Hudson River, because it's right at the top. There's a debris field around the house, filled with stuff that the dump trucks didn't take away. Lead gutter, more than you'd expect of the garden fence. A foundation line that can be traced. Somewhere in an old guidebook, I read that there was a remnant of the hitching post, and if you look at examples, this would be the remnant of the hitching post, and it's right where it ought to be, in the back of the house. Here are the stone blocks from the porte cochere. Some of these still exist. 20 to 23 inches, almost 2 feet on the sides, the large ones. They're cubes of sandstone or something, and you can see them right here in that 1860 picture. And we can see both sizes, the large and the small. These are small, believe it or not. So you can see the two sizes that held up the covered driveway. We can see parts of outbuildings. This is so old that a tree grew up and died underneath it. On the east overlook, which is a more modern 1930s thing, there are some really old foundations that you can actually see on this map. And the well. And here's the well on a 1926 title map for the creation of Inwood Hill Park. You can see it's wet on the bottom. It's square on the top, so this would have been covered with a pump. This brick square, and then fieldstone inside, still some cement covering it, and a wet bottom. and plumbing for the pump. All right, let's take a look. There's the site. Overlay the current park map. First we'll go see the porte cochere. Dirt pathway that goes partway between trails. Just too heavy to move. And these are still stuck in the ground. Maybe this is the original location. Maybe everything's been moved. Who knows? But we can sort of do a little study of these things. How many were there? Looks like there were 8 supports, 4 in front, 4 in back. So not everything still is. Most of the stuff was taken away. A few things remain. Pine trees, right on the house site where they were 150 years ago. Decorative garden fence behind the house. There's the hitching post, what's left of it. Foundation. Let's go see these outbuildings that we saw in that, was it an 1893 map? These would have been the viewpoints east. So this is more modern construction here, but against the west wall are some old stuff. And then at the very end of the overlook is even more stuff. Go, 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 go. Stop. And here's the well. You have to uncover this in order to get a good shot of it. You can see it's still wet on the bottom. And covered with concrete to waterproof it. Not far from the trail. And last at the site is the outbuildings or the barn, right near this rock quarry. Head towards the Hudson River and up the hill. And we can see these big post foundations. Maybe they're big gates or something like that, but it's right where the barns or the stables were. Can you imagine? There would have been really no underbrush here. This would have been gardens, lawns of grass, the finest Kingston gravel driveways. Here we are on the map. Whatever they are, they're old because trees have grown up underneath them and died. All right, this site scared me a little bit. By the way, they're hard to find, but there are some bricks up there of the House of Mercy, at least bricks that are on the site of the House of Mercy. So I like to think this is one of them. Took the place of the Thomson estate. We'll get the overlay, sort of see how they came together. Here's the entrance to the old Thomson estate, the guardhouse. What are we going to see here? We're going to see heating plant stuff and water tower stuff. This is entirely gone. I actually think a lot of it is buried. It had a basement. They probably just bulldozed it all into a hole and put some dirt over it and took some other stuff, took whatever they couldn't bury away in dump trucks. So this has a very deep underground tank. Another tank not as deep. Partial foundation lines of this coal and water plant. And a water tower base. Foundations, there are 4 of these concrete foundations that held up the water tower. Each one is 62 inches at the base. 2 storage tanks. The first one is just 20 inches deep. It's filled with debris. Here we can actually see a quick movie of it. And here on this map, we can see that there are 3, they call them 3 tanks. It could also be that these connect the plumbing from the water tower to the House of Mercy underground. Not much of a boiler room foundation, but it's there. And this hole scares me. Because it's only 8 inches in diameter. It looks like nothing. It's dirt. And then it opens up into something that goes down deeper than I am tall. And it's open on the bottom. So it goes places. Probably to the House of Mercy site. Well, let's explore the whole place. Water tower, heating plant. Just going to go right up that hill. Now we can start to see the bases here and here. I hoisted the 10 feet selfie stick into the air to try and get an image of the footprint with the pipe going up the center. All right, let's go to these storage tanks. So the House of Mercy overlook is on this side, and this is the east side. They're right next to each other. There's one. There's the other. Don't look like much. Here's the first one. Probably went down to the water pathway that connected the water tank with the, so that the House of Mercy would have water pressure. And here we can see it's different from other wells and different from cisterns in that it doesn't open out like a cistern, and that it is completely brick. It's just a bricked tube. All right, this second one almost ate my phone. That's why I don't like it. I was putting the selfie stick down there, but it wasn't fully extended, and so suddenly gravity extended the selfie stick, and it jerked, and the phone is just held in there by friction. All right, here we go. Oh boy. Oh! Okay, and then I had to quick pull it up and see if the phone was still there, and then I'll try a second time. I'm going to brush it off. Try again. It's 76 inches to the muddy bottom on the bottom. You can actually see it opens up, so the circumference doesn't go all the way to the bottom. It's bigger on the bottom. And it's 5 feet from a trail. All right, so that's the bulk of the talk tonight, but we're going to take care of a little bit of miscellany. The last house to the north, the farthest house to the north on the top road, owned by someone with the last name of Marie. This is the only shot we've got of this, the foundation of their barn right here. And then a cistern. Maybe this is a stable. Here's the site, just north of the Straus estate. So this is below the level of the trail. This is on the level of the trail. We're just going to look at the cistern in the film. It's the only cistern that faces east. Here it's where it's going to be. Partly caved in. Very large. House of rest for consumptives. driveway was held up by this retaining wall on the property line. There are also some outbuildings. This laundry, there's a little bit of brickwork here. There's looks like, who knows what this was, but this is right where it is on the map. Goes pretty much the whole length of the property line. And I guess would keep this driveway nice and level. When this place opened, they said they never turned down a patient, probably because the turnover was high. Kind of dark. I just recently found this foundation. This is where you would enter those terraced gardens. Now, the people in the tent have their fire pit here, but this ivy-covered, just 4 weeks ago there was no ivy, but now, just last week, ivy was already grown. So this building of the Jones estate, it's the only evidence of that whole thing. On the Beek and Talcott property out by their garden, where their garden was, is like a gateway or a part of a wall. So this is up the hill from the Clove. You turn right at Whaleback and just head straight up. Not that far. The only remains along River Road. Most of the houses were torn down because the highway is right there, but this one house seems to have escaped a little bit, the Kalin site. I found a piece of marble paving stone there. Part of the house is there even. All these yellow dots are where we've seen architectural remnants tonight. Pretty amazing that there is that much stuff up there. Pretty much shows you that the place is just blanketed with leftovers from the demolition. Reflecting pools, retaining walls, a lot of 5 or 6 cisterns, 4 or 5 wells. Fascinating. But there's more to examine next year. These sites here, look, there looks like there's another pond or something down by the railroad. And these houses are between highways. You could go down this pathway and go off trail and just head between the lanes of the highway uptown and downtown and just see if there's anything left. Probably nothing. And then the whole east side of the park. There were houses up here, just not in the 1860s. A few final images before we call it a night. There's the McCreary estate and the Kalin estate. And here's that Marie estate, or whatever its successive home was. And there's the boat basin by Shirakapak. And that's the iron foundry that was there until it was condemned in the 20s and demolished in the 30s. McCreary, Kalin, there's some outbuildings. So this is Park Path right now. That little section, and here's the section that goes up to the toll booths and the walk across the bridge. There's absolutely nothing that I can find here, but the ground is very soft, which makes me think that things might have been just covered over with dirt after being bulldozed. Kalin home. Outbuildings, River Road looking north. These are from mid-1920s. This house would burn down just a year later. Here's the Hayes home sharing that well with the Keppler home, which would be right here. (1904), there's the Talcott home, the House of Mercy. There, Flitner home should be here somewhere. There. And thank you so much for coming.